Hello, it's Friday, November 7th. Let's talk PlayStation. Let's kick it off with a Drive Club update, which is, there really is no update. The PlayStation blog said that they're still committed to releasing the PlayStation Plus edition of the game at some point. They're obviously saying this because November's PlayStation Plus games are up and we still don't have Drive Club PS Plus, but they're saying it's still coming. So it was also confirmed this week that Resogun, the PS4 exclusive, is now actually coming to PlayStation Vita. So Climax Studios is porting the game to PlayStation Vita. This is the same studio that ported, I believe, Dead Nation to PS4 and PS Vita. So there's that. I find this interesting because we learned early on with Resogun that the game was pretty complex because there were so many particle effects in the game, and that was the reason why the game wasn't going to come to, say, the PlayStation 3. Like, legitimately, that game has too much going on for the PlayStation 3 to necessarily handle. That's at least what we're being told. So if the game's coming to PlayStation Vita, I'd have to assume it's going to be severely toned down in terms of all the crazy particle effects that are going on in that game, but I don't know for sure. We'll have to wait and see. So this week it was also confirmed that with Little Big Planet 3, the game is pretty much completely backwards compatible with all the past DLC that you've previously purchased for the Little Big Planet games, specifically Little Big Planet 1 and 2. So any DLC that you've bought, you know, sticker packs, costumes, it's all going to be right there for you for free in Little Big Planet 3. And we also know that when you jump into that game, pretty much everything is in there, right? All the previous content from all LBP games, whether it's, you know, levels that were built, your costumes, if you're a Little Big Planet creator, all the same sort of source material is in there, like, you know, standard wood, metal, like literally everything from past games are in this new one, so that's good. I was recently playing Little Big Planet 2 this past weekend, kind of getting into the mood for LBP3, and needless to say, I'm now getting pretty excited for it. So PS4 Firmware 2.01 is now out. Usually Sony does this a lot, especially with major firmware updates. If they release a big major firmware, a few problems come with that firmware, and then, you know, a few weeks after they will release a 0.01 version after to sort of fix those bugs, and that's exactly what 2.01 is. It's fixing primarily the rest mode bug, which I was talking about with you guys, I believe last week or the week before. You know, a lot of people have been saying that this is definitely an issue. Your PS4 would be blinking the amber yellow light and you can't turn it back on, so you'd have to do some sort of hard reset or unplugging the thing, and then you'll turn it back on and it will say, oh, your PS4 wasn't turned off correctly. So that is now fixed, so that's good news there. So one big release that came out this past week was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, kind of a, you know, big game, I guess you could say. Well, one interesting thing about that is, if you didn't know, is that you can't share play that game. Sony has been pretty vocal saying share plays with every single game, but Call of Duty Advanced Warfare does not work. I haven't actually tested this, but apparently it blocks scenes from the game or something, and people are pretty upset about this. Now, Sony has commented on this, saying that developers actually have a choice if they want their games to be share played, and the developer reserves the right to block certain scenes in the game or what have you. And Activision has responded saying that the only reason why it's not completely supported is because the game was being, you know, developed and everything before the firmware, so Activision couldn't necessarily test the game on the new firmware, and so they're evaluating it to see if they will allow share play, or to understand that there's no technical issues when doing share play or something like that. That's what they're saying right now, but I find it interesting that Sony has been forward with saying that it is a situation where developers reserve the right to let you or not let you share play, much like the other features of PS4, like taking screenshots or recording gameplay. Clearly, one big major release coming up very, very soon, I believe on the same day as Little Big Planet 3, is Grand Theft Auto 5 for PS4. A lot of great details have come out about that game recently, so I'll just fill you in real quick. Obviously, we all have learned the game is 1080p native on PlayStation 4, 30 frames per second, which, you know, some people are like, oh, why not 60? But come on, let's be real here. 30 is pretty reasonable for that game on PlayStation 4. The big thing is it's got a first-person view now, which is entirely new for a Grand Theft Auto game. That's certainly going to add a whole different perspective to that series, so I can't wait to try that out. In terms of specific PlayStation 4 stuff, we know what the light bar does. When you're being chased by cops, it's going to be flashing blue and red. And for the touchpad, that you can use that to select weapons, or you actually touch the touchpad to change perspectives from third to first person. So there's that. Okay, time to move on to Sony Financials. Whenever we talk Sony Financials, it's usually not great news because we all know Sony loses a lot of money, and that's pretty much the same situation here. So for the months of July to September, Sony lost $1.2 billion. Now this isn't actually as big of a loss as Sony was expecting, so there's kind of good news there. The good news is the games division is doing still relatively well for Sony. Sony sold, I believe, 3.3 million PlayStation 4s, 800,000 PlayStation 3s, which is up from the past year. In terms of handhelds, they actually went down 100,000 units. PS Vita, PSP, PlayStation TV sold around 700,000 units within that time frame. The real big news that came out of the financials is that when you're looking at like raw numbers, it seems like the PlayStation 4 is at this point a clear 2-to-1 advantage against the Xbox One. It's at double the install base of Microsoft. So Sony's in a very good position. If you didn't think they weren't in a really good position before, they're in a really outstanding position right now. And it's just, I've talked about this so many times. It's one of those situations where they can't be too overly confident. They're in a good spot, but they can't get too comfortable. But they are in a really good position, and they just need to keep doing what they're doing, which is showing us more games, keeping the box affordable, which they're doing, because there's a lot of good bundles coming up this holiday season, including GTA 5 and LBP3, and the price is staying at $400. I mean, they're staying pretty lean and competitive there, so they're looking pretty good. It was also noted that in terms of financials, the PlayStation 4 has broke even, so all the money that Sony's invested in actually creating the hardware, releasing it, and losing some money initially on each box sold, we only found out just a few months ago that Sony finally turned a profit on the hardware, rather than when it first launched, they were losing money on each system, and it took one PlayStation Plus subscription or one game sold to recoup those losses. In a few months, it took. We learned that each box did earn money, and now PS4 is broken even, which is about 4 times faster than the PlayStation 3 breaking even. It took PS4 like 4 years. It took PS3 3 years to. Or it took PlayStation 3 4 years to break even. A lot of numbers. So let's talk about Sucker Punch Productions. The past news that we've been talking about with them is that they did recently have some layoffs. They released Infamous First Light and previously Infamous Second Son. That's a developer that just recently released, big PlayStation exclusives, so we're not going to be seeing a project from them for a while. But one big indicator that we always like to see is that when they do post new job listings, because not only does that tell us that they're getting ready to staff up for a new project, which of course they are, but you can look in those job listings and get a sense of what project they're going for. So in a new job listing for Sucker Punch, it's listed that they are looking for somebody that has strong skills in narrative to create a compelling story, and a developer that has experience in open world games. So that right off the bat tells us they're working on an open world game, and their previous game was open world, so we could possibly see another Infamous sequel. Maybe they're going to do a completely new open world game. Maybe they will actually go back and do a Sly Cooper game. Who knows? But that tells us that, at the very least, their next project is going to be that, which they have experience in, so it's kind of a no-brainer, but it's always nice to see that. Our final news story isn't necessarily, like, news. There's really nothing to go to kind of go on it, and I kind of don't like talking about these news stories, but it's like too juicy. It's too juicy not to talk about. So an Uncharted fan that made an Uncharted film, fan film, Martin Sofieta, I think his name is. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Forgive me. But he recently got to see Uncharted 4. He was at Naughty Dog's little headquarters and got to actually see the game, and he was telling us a little bit about it, kind of spilling the beans. And he, of course, said it looks absolutely phenomenal, and he's saying seeing Sully kind of blend the reality between real life and sort of photorealism in games. Like, he's just saying it looks incredible. So, like I said, it's not really a news story, and I think it's clear even if he didn't like what he saw, he's going to be relatively positive about it because he's speaking out and being vocal about it and everything and telling the internet about it, and his name's out there and whatnot. So, I mean, again, not really news, but I think we all do want to see it soon. I mean, the big thing here is, which we haven't really touched on much, is the PlayStation Experience event in December in Las Vegas. Now, that's going to be what we're all hearing is this is actually a relatively huge event. So Sony's got a lot of developers there, a lot of their own developers. Guerrilla Games is going to be there, for example. We all know that we don't know what Guerrilla Games is doing. They haven't announced their new IP yet. We all think it's a robot dinosaur RPG starring a female protagonist. But it seems like it's going to be a really big event, and I think that's what Sony needs. They need to be really aggressive, especially since, you know, despite the fact that Microsoft isn't selling nearly as many Xbox Ones, they're being very aggressive. You know, they just recently lowered the price of the X1 for the holiday season, so now the box is $350. They just released Sunset Overdrive, which, you know, I think for a lot of PlayStation fans, we're all pretty sour over, especially if you don't have an Xbox One. It's like, oh, that looks like a great classic Insomniac game. It's getting a lot of good positive reception, and you know, Microsoft's also got the Master Chief Collection. Like, they're going into the holiday season pretty strong. Granted, Sony is too. I think they're going into it pretty strong with, like, Little Big Planet 3 and everything, but, you know, they are a pretty big competitor. I still wouldn't count them out entirely, even though they're losing by nearly double the sales. But this seems like it's going to be a really big event, so you really got to stay tuned for that, which I will, of course, cover that event. Anyway, that wraps up this episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. That Naughty Dog art book video was supposed to come out this past week. Couldn't get around to it. I actually went out and bought a new car. So, not to, like, give an excuse, but, like, that's what I was doing. I was buying a new car, so I was enjoying that the whole week and driving around and whatnot. So, and I still had to go to work and everything because you know, cars are expensive. But it's coming out this week for sure. So, or this next coming week. So definitely check that out. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.